For Patrick Lecture 33, which is Right and Wrong Faith, Occupation with Self, at the end of the lecture, in the question and answer section, there was a discussion of suicide. And as part of that discussion, the guide suggests that looking away, denying versus affirming what we see and feel, distortion versus truth, these all create obstacles to faith. It felt like an important topic to discuss. I've learned recently that the downloadable lecture on pathwork.org does not contain this section. At the end of the lectures, the guide often opened up for questions and answers and gave answers during the end of the session. And the editing process of taking these out from the public versions has a great deal to do with the fact that they were far-ranging. They were all over the place. They're very difficult to index. There are many of them. You never knew what somebody would ask. I tease about this, and perhaps I'm being light now because it's a deep subject, suicide, so it'd be light for a moment. If I had a question for the guide, I might have held on to it for months. And so when the opportunity came and the guide said, "Any questions?" I might be far more prepared with my question about another topic than I would be about the issue that was just addressed. So I personally feel that I understand why the Q&As are so wide-ranging, why they often aren't in-depth questions about the actual material presented that night. And often there was a separate question and answer session 2 weeks after the lecture so that people could muse on the points that were made, take some time, go into depth, and then bring them up again. And those Q&A sessions are more likely to have deeper questions about the material than the ones immediately after. But I say this so that if you go looking for Patrick Lecture 33 and you go looking for these particular questions and answers, you won't find them on the public copy. They are in the unedited versions of the lectures, which have been made available to members of the foundation. I advocate membership because they need the money. It's not a rich organization, and they support the website and a lot of different aspects of leadership for the regions. They don't get a lot of money in return. So if you are in the mood, if you feel like it, if you feel generous, I invite you to consider membership in the foundation. And then you will have access to the unedited lectures and these bits and pieces, additional materials, Q&As, etc. So let me get back to the more serious topic of suicide. First of all, on my website under this topic, I included a list of resources. People who have been touched by suicide, there's an element of trauma to this. And so I included a list of resources, helplines. These are specifically for the United States, but some of the online material might be available worldwide. So I'll go ahead and go into it. In the lecture, in the Q&As about suicide, the guide emphasizes that each case is unique. General things can be said, but they are general things. And then there are specifics to an individual. What's going on, what their struggle is about, how hard it's hitting them, why suicide even enters their mind. However, he makes one general comment, and that is that the main factor in suicide motives is shame. Overwhelming, numbing, paralyzing shame about facing consequences that the person feels responsible for, they feel they have triggered or begun, and they don't know how to deal with. And therefore, for the rest of us, or those of us who are not considering it, it's good to be watchful when someone descends into feelings of deep shame. It can be dangerous for them. Sometimes it looks like the only way out is to end the process. It's a warning sign. So I believe that's why he mentions that that's one of the main factors. So it gives us something to say, if I see this, then I might want to step in and help, reach out my hand, see what I can do. It's not that anybody is responsible for that necessarily, but it gives us a handle on what might be helpful. Then the guide goes into, or I beg your pardon, I chose to include a section from Patrick Lecture 216, connection between the incarnatory task and our lives. And the reason I did it is this. That lecture spends some time talking about two different scenarios. One is where the ego literally wants to opt out. It wants to quit. I'm done. It's too much. I don't know how to proceed. I want out. The ego says that. The ego is how we normally speak. It's what we speak through. And if the ego can't carry the life task, if it feels that it's just so completely overwhelmed that it can't figure it out, it can be appropriate to put it down. The struggle is that the spirit may say there's more, there's something else here for you to learn. So suicide being voluntary, the ego has a choice. It could stay, it's choosing to leave. But that struggle, that particular struggle, includes that the spirit says you could stay. Then there's another case where spirit says it's time to go. If I say that lightheartedly, the reason I speak that way is I don't know the reasons. So how would the spirit say it's time to go? It comes up with a circumstance that you can't surmount. Terminal illness, car accident, meteor coming through the ceiling and hitting you in the head. These are not ego choices, specifically ego choices, and therefore they're made on a deeper level that involves more factors. So spirit must cooperate in that. So Patrick Lecture 216 speaks of two different scenarios. One where the ego is pushing for an end to a particular incarnation, and the second where spirit is saying, we're done with this incarnation. I'm not going to go too much deeper into that, but I will be specific, in part because I can't really discuss anybody else's situation, although I know of some. It's not fair for me to discuss it. I know third hand, second hand, but I don't know the details. What I can speak of is that when I was young, quite young, I felt had great feelings of discouragement. I can relate to it being shame. I didn't feel it as shame. It wasn't that I'd done anything, but that perhaps I wasn't capable of doing anything, and that my efforts weren't bearing fruit, or specifically, I was accused of bullying someone. So in that, I can sense into the guide's explanation of shame being a little overwhelming. I was 11 years old at the time. And there are reasons why I added up everything and said, then there's no point. I'm worth more dead than alive. Nobody wants me. I'm going to eat worms and die. It was a kid saying this, so I can't be overly serious about it, except that I tried. Fortunately, I was a kid and I didn't know how. Had I known what I was doing, had my effort actually been deliberately effective, I wouldn't be here today. And that's my point in talking about this. I've heard from many people this week about how they've had suicidal thoughts, not necessarily acting on it, but having had the thoughts. I have had suicidal thoughts throughout my life. The last time was when I was 40 years old. But I never actually did anything about it except for that one time when I was 11 years old. But I was the kind of kid who would walk along a mountain trail and look over the edge and have a completely thorough visualization of throwing myself over the edge. I can't explain that. Now, people can come up with explanations, past life stuff. I don't know, so I can't defend it. But I can say that perhaps I was more fragile than I am able even today than to recognize. Let me straighten out that phrase. Perhaps I was more fragile than even today I am fully able to recognize. Now, I'm talking about thoughts of suicide. What does that do? It perhaps helps you understand how people can go further than you did. In those discussions, uh, I shared some of my feelings, incidents, etc. It is my impression that almost everybody has had fantasies about giving up, quitting, especially when things are difficult. Some of us carry those through. The majority of us do not. What I try to do to help people work with those feelings is tease a little bit. Now, I'm not dealing with suicidal people. I'm not on a hotline. So when they share it, it's not a serious issue at that time. And so I try to use humor and a light voice to encourage them to look at the situation from a different perspective. And one of the ways I do that comes from my experience. And that is, if I had been successful when I was 11 years old, I now realize how much of my life would not have happened. And I do value my life. I value the things I've done in life, the relationships I have created, the work that I have done, the children that I gave birth to, nurtured, and helped grow into adulthood. Even difficult relationships are important. They helped me grow. Even if I wasn't as mature as I would have liked to have been in the moment, there was a growth process, usually for both people. So, in a teasing manner, if the negative part of me, if the part of me that was mean-spirited and didn't care about what I could accomplish in life had won out, my candle would have been snuffed out. And I like to put things in game format. And in game format, they get points for taking me out. And I can be more effective. I can be more positive when I think in terms of, you're not taking me out. I won't quit. I won't give you the satisfaction. I won't let you win. Now, the problem with that is there's no winning or losing. That's dualistic thinking process. However, in my personality type, there is winning and losing. So I'm playing to my strengths in asking myself to take charge of myself, to stand up for what I believe in, and not allow forces that may be antagonistic to my fundamental positive beliefs to wipe me out or encourage me to wipe myself out. So negative aspects of us encourage us to leave. And if they can't get us to leave, they may also encourage us to become ineffective, to engage in self-sabotage or destructive behaviors, to heap on the demerits of life to the point where we're almost ashamed to raise our head and look at other people in the face, which is just as damaging, can be just as damaging as the actual end of life. Now, those are my thoughts on this. Again, I have deep respect for the seriousness of the topic. I commend you for even watching a video about something this serious. I encourage you that if you believe that you or anybody you love is serious about this, to reach out for resources. There are times to ask for help. and then there's a time for independent action. So that's my short summary of this particular section of the lecture. Patrick Lecture 33, Right and Wrong Faith, a discussion of the spiritual perspective on suicide. Thanks for listening and take care.